Hi there and welcome to Delicious Art Classes for Adult Beginners. Today we're doing a class, just a simple avocado painting. This is designed for absolute beginners, so it's going to be a step-by-step process and we're going to paint this little avocado here. If you've bought the video, then you should have some notes like this that you can print out, so that would be a PDF copy. And on there, you've got just a few words talking about what we're doing today. You've got a colour version, this one here, of the avocado, and it's got the crosshairs or the grid mark on it. So that's the lines across the middle. And that's going to help us draw everything, and I'll guide you through that in a moment. And we've also got a black and white picture of the avocado, and that's to help you see the tones or the range from lights to darks, because that's really important when it comes to doing your artwork, is to have a nice range of tone and to then do it in black and white and convert that to colour. So the first part of today's class, we'll be doing a charcoal sketch, and this is the way my classes usually go. So we do a little charcoal sketch to start with, referring to both of those pictures for different reasons, and I'll take you through that too. And that's just a little rehearsal of the picture. It just gets us into art mode and gets us relaxed and familiar with what we're going to paint afterwards. So what you'll need is to have your notes nearby and your picture reference. You may also have it on an iPad or something close by as well, so that's always a good thing too, because you can zoom in and see detail on a screen. If not, then this printout should be fine. The other thing you're going to need is an art diary like this, or some drawing paper. And little art diaries are great because you can just keep your notes in there and all your little sketches and bits and pieces. They don't have to be for anyone else to see. It's just a place to do a few ideas and sketches before you do the main picture. So what we're going to do is a charcoal sketch of the avocado into your art diary first off, and then we'll go and do a second version in pastels and colour. So what I like to do is just draw up a little square or rectangular shape to match the shape of my painting onto my drawing paper or into my art diary. So they call these thumbnails, and you can do them this big or you can do it this big. So I like to work about this size usually for my first little sketch. So if you just draw up a frame like that onto your page at about the same proportions as your picture. So it's a landscape shape today, so we're wide and narrow down the sides. Then what you want to do is grab yourself a little ruler, and we want to put a halfway line on here. So this is our grid mark. And I'm just using a thin piece of charcoal to draw a fine line on there. You can see I didn't measure that or go to too much trouble, but feel free to do that if you want to measure it, but I'm quite happy just to do this, I guess, a little bit freehand at this point, because I like to just relax into my art and become accustomed with everything without getting too caught up with measuring and dimensions and things like that. So when we do the colour version, we'll measure it all up properly, I promise. But for this one, we just want to be a little bit loose and relaxed. So once you've got your grid line drawn up like that, then it's time to start looking at your picture and figuring out how this needs to be drawn up. So I'll make sure I've got both of those there on the screen for you to see. So when I'm looking at the picture of the avocado, I'm going to break it down into quarters, and that's what the grid mark is for. So you can actually look at this picture in smaller segments, and sometimes that makes it a lot easier to draw because you just draw the pieces that you see in each segment. So let's start on the top left segment, and we'll just draw what we see inside this quarter here. Now, if it helps, you might want to cover up the other areas of the picture with your hand or a piece of paper. And just focus on this top left-hand quarter, and that will help us get all the bits and pieces in the right place. So I'm going to start on the far left, and if you look at your picture, you can just by eye figure out how far inside the edge the little avocado starts, so where the edge of the avocado sits. So that's probably, I would say by eye, it's probably about 1/6 of the way in on this quarter. So for instance, I'll just do a little mark on here. If that was halfway, that's what I'm talking about, that might be my halfway line, then this would be about a quarter there and there. And so it comes slightly beyond a quarter. So I'm going to say 1/6 just because it's more than a quarter and less than a third. So roughly I'll start my avocado about here, this far in on my page. Then I'm going to go all the way over to the other grid mark. I'm just looking at the front half of the avocado at the moment, so I'm not going to look at the back bit, we're just looking at the green section. So where does that cross over on this line? And I would say by eye, it's probably about halfway up on this grid mark. So if you find your halfway line about there, then that's going to be where it crosses over. So now we've got those 2 points in place, we can draw the line and kind of basically join the dots and draw the shape of that avocado. Of course, it's not a straight line, so you need to have a little bit of an arc or a curve on it. And then it comes around and down to the side like that. Something like that. Don't stress if you don't get it perfect first time around. This is just our little practice. So I'm going to say it's about that curve. So now we've joined the dots, so we've figured out where that part of the avocado sits within the grid line. Now the other area we need to start looking at is this back section, so the other half of the avocado. So how high up on the grid line does the edge of that come to? And I reckon it's probably halfway between half and the top, so say about a quarter. So about there. And then where inside this quarter does it join onto that front section of the avocado? So how far in does that happen? And if I look at these little marks I made before, I'd say it's about a quarter of the way in. So about there. So once you've got your point marks in like that, then we're just going to join them together again and make another little arc. So that is basically the two main lines of those halves of the avocado done into that quarter area. The next thing we need to look at is how the seed fits in there. So you can see the edge of the seed starts on this halfway line here. So we put a little mark on there. The other end of it comes to just beyond halfway. So if that's halfway, I'd say it comes to about there. So that'll be the size of the seed from there to there. And then it's just a matter of drawing the lines and joining the dots, but checking the shape as well of the seed, because it's quite a distinct sort of shape. It's kind of not quite, but sort of a triangular shape. And it gets a little bit more pointy on the bottom side or the right-hand side. So the side that's hitting this halfway line kind of comes in on a slight narrower end. And then the seed comes up, it goes close to that edge there, and then it comes down. So see how it gets closer to the edge of the avocado here. It's like a shoulder, this bit here. And then it kind of tapers off in towards that center line. And then as you come down and draw it, oh, we'll go down into that bit later. So that's essentially where the seed sits inside that quarter. So we've got our main drawing already started in that section there. And we don't need to put anything else in there because that's all the information we need. So let's move down into this bottom left corner now, and we'll continue on those lines. So what I want to do is look at the seed and see how far down inside this bottom quarter it falls. So if my halfway line's about there, and you can actually put more grid marks on to your picture if you want more lines to refer to. So you could put a halfway line right across through there and down through there, and that's going to break it down into smaller segments and make it a bit easier for you. So say that's my halfway line, and I've got my halfway line here, then I know my seed sits above the halfway line about there, round about there. So then I can join all these lines up like that and create the shape of my seed and make sure that it's in the right spot within this little quarter area. You don't want to make it too low or too wide, because that way you won't get the rest of the avocado in proportion. So that can be our seed. Then I can come down, I'm going to figure out, so we've got two edges of the avocado down in this bottom area. We've got the green edge, which is the inside of the avocado, and then we've got the dark edge, which is the outside. So if halfway is there, the green edge comes to just below halfway, so I'd say about to there. And then the dark edge is not much more below there, so it's about to there. So once we've got those two lines in, then we can kind of bring this around. So this line merges into two down the bottom. So just follow that line, and I'm going to follow the green edge. So I want the inside of the avocado edge. And curve that around. Just watch your curve. You might have to redo it a few times if you don't quite get it the right shape. Okay, so that's the inside green area of my avocado. And then we've got the outside area, and it comes to a point about here. So it starts around there and comes down through there like that. So that is essentially the half of the picture drawn. So once you get your head around measuring and distance and stuff like that with your grid lines, it really does make a huge difference to your drawing when you can figure out where things sit within each part. So let's move over to the other half now. So we've done all this. We don't need to look at that anymore. We cover that up if that makes it easier for you. It actually does make it easier, doesn't it, when you can't see that half? So I'll put my diary over the top of it so you can't see it. And then all we've got to look at then is what's happening over here. And then we can, again, break that into sections. So if I just look at the top right-hand section, we've literally got two lines to draw in there. So the inside one is the green of the avocado. And if I measure my eye across this grid line here, I'd say that that intersects at about halfway again on this grid mark. So if I find my halfway mark on my picture and then literally just join the dots and come down to there, it has got a little squarish end on it, but we'll get to that in a minute. So join that down to there, so I've got a nice little arc down through there. And then the other line that we've got to put in is the other side of the avocado. And so let's have a look at how far in that sits inside our page. So if that's halfway, it's probably not quite a quarter, so it's about there, I would say. And then all I've got to do is join that dot to this dot and just notice the shape, because it kind of comes down like that. It's got a little knob on it too, so we can draw that in. Comes down like that. So that's that quarter pretty much. And if you want to pop your little knob on, you can just draw a little bump on the end there. So that's our knob on the avocado. And then we can move down into the bottom right-hand corner, and we'll do exactly the same thing. So we've already got all our lines in on the grid marks because we've done those in the other sections. So now it's just a matter of looking at the shape. So let's start with this one where we've got the little knob. It kind of comes across and then it folds down and then it comes back in at just above the halfway mark. So I reckon it comes in about there. Yeah, about there. About lower than that. And then we've got this top section here. So that comes down. It's got a little dip in it there and around, and it joins up with the lines that we made earlier. And the other thing we've got is the outside of this one. So it starts here and it also has a little bump on the end and then comes down and around like that. So we've literally got our drawing all in place. Everything is where it needs to be. Once you've got this part done, just double check everything. Make sure you've come in the right distance from the edges to the lines, that you haven't gone too high here. I think I have, but that's probably because my page is a bit out of whack. over to the side, the little bump, and notice all the little shapes and the bends and the curves and things like that that tell us what this is. Because an avocado is such a common fruit. We all know what an avocado looks like. It's from a familiar shape. And so just be aware that you want to make sure you get those familiar shapes in there. If we did this perfectly circular, then it wouldn't look like an avocado at all. So knowing that, the flesh of an avocado is much deeper here between the bottom of the seed and the other end of it, whereas the top side, where the seed sits higher, you have less flesh around that area. So just being aware of that sort of thing and noticing how things sit like that. Once we've got the drawing in, and this is just a flat line drawing, there's no dimension, there's no shadow or shape or anything going on here, then we can start to do some shading and look at the tones. So we've used the colour version with the grid on it to do the drawing, get everything in the right spot. Now we can refer back to the black and white picture and focus on how dark it is in the darkest areas and in the lightest areas, where the shine is on the seed and the little bits of shadow. So we'll just spend a couple of minutes doing that with charcoal, and then we'll get on to the colour version. So if you've got a little tin of charcoal, I've got this little tin here, and they come in different widths, so you can get chunky fat ones like that, or thinner ones like that. So when I want to do some shading, I like to use a fat stumpy piece, and you might need to break it if you've only got long pieces, but that way I can kind of lie it down on my page and pull it around and just shade in the areas like that, so you get a nice even sort of coverage, and you don't need to use the end of it, because if you use the end, it's great for your fine lines, but not so good if you want to fill in a big area. So we're not going to fuss too much with the detail at this point. I just want to really notice the tones. So let's colour in the back area first. So that's the dark skin of the avocado. Just lie down your little bit of charcoal, break it if you have to, so you've got a shorter piece, and run it around on your drawing and darken off that area there. Now you'll notice as you get to the bottom section, so this right hand side under the avocado, just down in here, it's actually a bit darker because there's shadow there. And even though the light is not terribly obvious on this particular picture, I can see that there is light shining from above the avocado. So that means that everything underneath is going to have more shadow. It's going to be a little bit darker down inside that area there. So I can make that as black as possible. And then as we come around, I just lighten my pressure a little bit and don't press quite as hard with the charcoal. So it's still a dark colour, but I've got it much blacker under here. If you're using willow charcoal, which is what I've got, you might find it's very soft and it doesn't get quite as black as I want it to sometimes. And that's when charcoal pencils or compressed charcoal would be a better option if you want to get more variation in the tone. But for just little sketches like this, your willow charcoal is fine. It's very soft and it's natural. So if you find you've gone too dark or something like that, just pop your fingers into it and run it around, and you'll find that'll lighten it off a little bit, sort of graze it off a little bit. Depending on your paper, you might get some funny little shapes or textures in there. That's okay. This is just a rough sketch, so we don't need to be too fastidious or careful with it. So that's the back part, and that's literally all we're going to bother to do. If you want to put a bit of detail on the little bump there, you can do that. If you want to take any charcoal off and lighten anything, you can do that as well with your kneadable eraser. So these are great. They're very pliable. It's like blue tack. Feels like blue tack. And you can pull pieces off and have little pieces. You can reshape it. So if I just wanted a small piece like that, I can just shape it to a tip or a knife edge or whatever I want, and I can dab it into my charcoal and take some of the charcoal off, so I can get a little bit of light just in there onto that little knob. by taking the charcoal off with this kneadable eraser. So kneadable means kneading it like you would some dough, bread, or whatever. So these are awesome if you want to get some little highlights into things. So you can see all those little dots with bumps on the skin of the avocado. You can actually just make a little point on your eraser and dot that through there, and it'll lift off a little bit of the charcoal and just create some variation in tones. But we're not going to spend too much time doing that stuff. Okay, so let's have a look at the other half of this avocado. Now we've got a dark section on the skin on the outside of it, so that's this area here. So again, just get your bit of charcoal and rub it around on there and push that in so that we're making it darker. Notice too that this one sits in front of the other half of the avocado, and this is why I wanted to darken off the first part, because that way if we don't make this front dark skin as dark as that, it will come forward. So what we need to do is make sure that this skin on the front half of the avocado is a little lighter than the one behind. That way it's not sort of getting lost in each other, and we can sort of tell the difference between the two. And to do that, I've sort of lightened up the skin on this one, but I've also just gone back in again there to darken that off, and you can see how that's now looking like it's behind and this one's in front. It's all about the light. Definitely all about the light. If you've gone too dark and you've got too much charcoal down on there, you can't see the difference between the two, then once again, get your kneadable eraser and you kind of draw with it almost, just to take some of that charcoal off and lighten up the edge of the avocado along here so that it sits forward and doesn't get lost in the one behind it. And it's also got a bit of a bumpy, stemmy thing at the end there. So your kneadable eraser is excellent for doing this sort of stuff and really great for using with charcoal. It's also really good for blending. So if I didn't want to put my fingers in there to blend, I could just use my eraser and gently wipe that around there and get a nice even kind of blend. So you can use it for lots of things. Okay, so if we've done all of that bit, I might darken that up a little bit just on this side, because again, it's in shadow and the light is not hitting that area. So I'm going to make that much darker under there. So see how by darkening some areas, we're creating some shadow and it's already starting to get some form and contour. And that's what we're trying to achieve. And the way you do that is by tone. It's by using your darks and lights. And just being really aware of where they are, even if they're super subtle and you can hardly see the difference. It makes a massive difference when you're trying to make something look 3D or solid. Okay, and then trying to kind of get that variation from dark to light going on. So the next thing we need to do is look at the inside of this, and obviously it's green and we're doing this in black and white. So what we need to do is just fill the whole thing very lightly with a bit of charcoal. It's not super white, so we want it to be slightly grey, mildly grey. Okay. And of course, around the outside of the green section is a little darker green. So if you press a little bit harder around the edge there, where you can see that darker green colour, just to get a bit more contrast happening. So just put a little bit more charcoal down on there. We're going to stick our fingers in this in a second and pull it around. And darken off just a slight bit to create that, range of greens. Then once you put your charcoal on there, just pull your finger around in that circular shape of the avocado. Now this is the really smooth section, so we want to have a lovely smooth movement with your finger. So just keep going backwards and forwards and pulling it around in that shape, so round and round and round to get that lovely smooth effect. So see how by doing that you can create different textures. So by just keeping your finger, what I do is keep it on the paper. So I'm not lifting it up and doing this kind of thing, because when you do that, you get broken marks. You can kind of have like fingerprints in it. So better to keep your finger on there the whole time. And we can darken things up again, so don't stress if you're losing some of the detail or the dark. And just run your finger around, but keep it down on the paper, even if it's only very lightly, to get that lovely smooth surface or the feeling of it. Okay, now just around the edge of the avocado, see the edge of the skin here? It's kind of got a bit of a wiggly shape to it. It's like a wiggly, uneven edge. So I'm going to just wiggle the end of my charcoal around there, just to try and achieve that natural sort of wiggly shape a little bit. Okay. This is our little rehearsal. We're going to do this all over again in a minute, but then we'll be using some colour. So just get that nice wiggly, uneven kind of shape happening through there. And then if you've lost some of your darker green, which I've done, just put a bit more charcoal down around the edge where the green is darker again. Just come back over it. Use the charcoal on its side so you get that nice smooth kind of finish. Now this is where tone is really important. So I've just noticed my skin on my avocado is about the same colour as the green on my inside, and that's not right. If you look at your black and white picture, you can see that the inside of the avocado is very light, isn't it? It's nearly white. So to change that, and this is what you need to notice a lot when you're painting, you need to change the tone. So I'm just going to use my kneadable eraser and get some of that off now, because it's too dark. So see how that lifts it off really nicely and gets that nice white or lighter tone back in there. That's better. So your eraser is really handy for this kind of thing. And that's why I give you a black and white picture to look at, because it actually really helps you to find the tones and just, learn about them a bit more and have some awareness around the light and the dark. All right, now we need to do the seed. So the seed is a solid object and it's got some light shining on it. If you look at the black and white picture, let's do what we see there. I'm going to make it fairly dark, not quite as dark as the skin, except for that underside there where there's a shadow in that right-hand bottom corner. The rest of it is reasonably dark, as in grey. So I'm going to fill that in with the charcoal. And then I'm going to just gently put my finger into it and push it around, because I just want to soften that off a tiny bit. Keep it darker on that right-hand bottom side, because what's happening there is there's light bouncing off the top of the seed. It might be an overhead light or a window or something. But this side is in shadow. So we want to keep that in shadow, consistent with the skin. Remember on the skin before, we made it darker under here. So everything has shadow on that side, if that makes sense. Everything's kind of darker underneath because the sun's not, or the light's not hitting it. And that will help to create this lovely effect of 3D. Okay. So just give it a little bit more dark on that right side there, and then we'll use the eraser again to get some light in, and then hopefully that should make it look like it's a solid object. So touch that up there for you. Cool. So get your kneadable eraser and notice where the light is on the seed. So it's got light in two places. We've got a bit of light here on the bottom. So if you just rub it with your eraser, take out some of the charcoal and make it white, or the same colour as your paper. So that's just a little shine on the bottom there. Okay, and then there's also shine on the top side on this other end, but it's right on the very edge. So what I'm going to do is just rub that around the side like that and give it a little shine on that side as well. And that already looks like it's 3D. It looks like it's kind of jumping out of the page at you. And that's what you want to achieve, is that lovely feeling of solidity, that it's a real solid object. So you can kind of play between the eraser and the charcoal just to get the tones right. But again, refer back to your black and white picture, always. And that will help you find the lights and the darks. So whenever you are painting something, if you do a black and white picture of it as well, it's going to be really helpful for you. We've got some patterns and different shades in there that you can kind of do if you want to. You know, with your charcoal, you can just do some areas a little darker. It's got that beautiful patterns on the seeds, or you could just leave it, whatever works for you. And the final thing we want to do before we move on to the next segment is the shadows underneath the avocado. So if you notice underneath, there's a little shadow here, and then there's a shadow under this part as well. So by putting a shadow on the table or the surface that this item is sitting on, it just gives it some gravity, grounds it. It's no longer floating around in space, it's sitting somewhere, and that feels nice. And then you can just gently, gently push that shadow in with your fingers and soften it all off if you want to, or you can darken it a bit more. Darken it up through there. So you know, with the willow charcoal, the more you push it around, the kind of lighter it gets. So it's a very soft charcoal. Okay, so just pushing that around, a little bit of shadow down through there, and that puts it on a plate or a table or a surface, which is easier to look at with our eyes. And again, if you put too much down, you want to get it off, then just use your eraser to wipe it off and get the white back in. And so that's our little avocado. And next stage, we're going to do that in colour. Same process, but then we'll be using colour to do all the shading. Lovely, lovely. All right, so the next part, let's get ready for that one. We'll pick some paper and colours and get ready, and then we might have a short break, and then we'll come back and finish it off. So I'm going to put this aside just there for now, because what I want to do is have a look at some colours that we might use for this. So I've tried to keep my colour selection to a fairly basic range, because I know not everybody has a huge range of colours. So, and we also need to make sure that we have a nice range from light to dark. So down the bottom here, I've got some dark. This is a Flinders Red, it's called. I think that might be the same colour, I'm not sure. But I'll just do some little swatches on here. So when you're choosing colours, make sure that you have a nice, rich, dark colour. So Flinders Red or Flinders Blue would be lovely if you have either of those. Or a black, if that's all you have. Black is also awesome. I'm going to stick with this for now, and then if I need to go any blacker, I can down the track. So that's my Flinders Red. I'm just going to see if this is the same. Yeah, it is, just a shorter bit. So I can put one aside. The next colour I've got here is a reddy brown colour. I can see a fair bit of that in the skin and the seed of the avocado. So I've tried to match the colours to what I can see in the picture. So that's a red-brown kind of colour. And then I've got a purple. Purple's always amazing for shadows and things. So I love putting purple into my art. So that's going to be lovely, blended in with these ones, just to create some really nice shadow and tone. So purple. And I can see this orangey red colour. So you might have a nice, actually that's not nice at all. That's a horrible pastel. It's really hard. See how it's not going down on the paper easily? It's really hard and yucky. It's something about that colour if you've got it. It's a sort of a red, I think. I'm going to find another red. And that's the thing with some pastels. Different colours will have different feelings. Some are hard and some are soft. Some feel kind of really chalky. And others, you've really got to push hard to make it work. This is another red. It's a bit too red, I think. Probably want something a bit more orange, but I'll stick with that for now. Get rid of that one, don't like that. So a bit of a red colour. There's red on the seed, and we could probably pop a bit of red in the skin as well. And then of course green. So I've got this lovely green. I know most people don't have a lot of green, so I'm going to try and use just the one green, and then add yellow in to kind of make it a bit more limey colour. And also this pale yellow for the inside of the avocado, so it's more kind of lemony yellow. So I've got a couple of yellows and a green there, and then I've got, this is Australian grey, so it's not white but it's light, so that's going to be nice for some of the lighter areas, and then of course white for the highlights. So that's my colour palette basically. And I've tried to put that down there in order from dark to light. So always make sure that you have dark, mid and light colours. If you just choose all mid colours, then your artwork will be kind of flat. And that's not a bad thing, you know, different paintings and pictures and things require different tones. But if you want to create some drama and interest in your art, then you really need to make sure you've got beautiful lights and darks, and that will just make everything pop. So it's important to do that. I'm just looking at the picture of my charcoal and realising that I didn't give it enough of a shoulder here. So it's kind of comes out there. And this is what's really good about doing a little practice drawing, because you can come back and look at it and think, oh yeah, that shape's not quite right. I probably should have made it a bit rounder or something. And so you can adjust things and just have a little practice. There we go. Anyway, I'll stop mucking around with that. Yeah, it's so wrong. So this needs to be rounder here. Yeah, that's a better avocado shape. And then down through here, actually, it needs to be a bit deeper too. So wider there. Anyway, the beauty of rehearsals. So there are colours, and there's a little swatch there of the colours that I've picked. Now we're not all going to have the same colours. You might have a different red or a different purple, or you might have a darker green. Just use whatever you've got. Don't stress about it. The lovely thing is you can always mix colours on the paper. So for instance, you know, this is my green. Now that is a bit darker than what I've got on there, but if I put some yellow into that, it's suddenly gone into this beautiful limey green colour, which is gorgeous. And so you can create that right on the page with your pastels. You don't have to have every single colour in your picture. You can actually make it. And instead of mixing paints on palettes and mixing colours and then, you know, they dry up or you can't use them again or something, it's just wonderful that you can mix your colours with pastels as you go, literally, on your paper. And you can just make it right there. And if it's not right, if it's wrong and you don't like it, then you just go over it and change it, you know. So you can actually keep layering colours and keep adding to them and changing things around until you get the colours you like. But I just dearly love mixing things like greens and purples, make beautiful shadows. Look at that, it's gorgeous. So instead of having a grey shadow under your avocado, you could mix these two colours and have this really lovely, rich, warm shadow. So there's some really fun things you can do with your pastels on your paper as you go. And you don't need anything else. You just need a few fingers and a few pastels, and that's it. So it's a lovely medium, and it's nice not having to use brushes and you know, terps and all that stuff. And they never dry out. Like you can start a painting and come back in 6 months and it's still there in exactly the same situation or form that it was when you started. So pastels are the best, I reckon. Okay, so let's move on to getting our paper organised. I'm going to put my little palette aside. So I always like to choose my colours and then keep them in a separate container like this so that I'm not forgetting what I used and picking up the wrong one, especially if you don't get it finished in one go. So I'm going to pop my art diary away. And what I've got now is a little board. And so this is the board that I tape my paper onto for when I'm doing my artwork. So just move that across so you can see it's obviously very well used. Okay. Now, I said on here, what did I say about paper colour? Leave the background unpainted, so it would be good on a mid-grey, light blue or violet. So when you are choosing a paper colour, for something like this, for instance, I'd be looking at that and going, okay, I'm not going to fill in the background. I want to be able to put a dark shadow down, so I don't want a really black paper or something that I can't get dark colours to be seen. I don't particularly like white paper terribly, so maybe something in between, you know, it's got a nice tone to it that I can still get darks down onto and they'll be standing out, they'll be able to be seen. So pastel papers come in lots of different colours. I'm not sure what I've got in here, but let's see. So let's have a look. I'm going to go work on this purple aubergine kind of colour. Yeah, it would actually. It would look quite nice. However, I feel like I don't want it to be quite that dark because then the dark of the avocado might get a little bit lost in the paper colour. So I'm going to say no to that one. This one is a similar tone. It's more grey. Love that colour, but no to that one. I've got a few sheets of that. This one is quite nice. So my avocado would stand out nicely on that. I could easily put my darks down and it would be easy to see on this blue colour. Just move that over so you can see what I'm talking about. Does it go with green? Would the green look nice with the blue? You know, it's all that stuff to think about. Not necessarily, but then I'm not a fan of blue paper either. So no to that one. And this is often down to personal choice too. So you do what you do, basically. What about this one? This one's not too bad. I think this is Australian grey colour. I can't remember now. But the dark would definitely stand out on this paper because it's lighter. The green would look quite nice. The orange of the seed would match the paper colour because it's got that nice orangey kind of tone. So I'm going to go, yeah, that could work. The others away. This one's too dark. I could see the darks and the shadows, but I think it's a bit too dark. So that was a burnt umber, I think, or sienna. This is dark blue or storm blue. Again, I think that's a bit too dark. So I'll just have a quick flick through, see what else I've got. This is more yellowy. No. Okay, I'm going to stick with that. This one's lovely too. This is a rose grey, I think. That's always a lovely option to have. That would also be quite nice, but I think I'm going to stick with that one. So as you can see, there's lots of different paper colours you can get, and that's nice too, nice maroon. That would look pretty good, but still I think it might be a tad too dark. So let's stick with the creamy coloured one. There's also black paper, but I won't even consider that because we won't be able to see the skin of the avocado. So I'm going to choose this colour paper. You might not have enough choices, but just use whatever you've got. Hopefully it'll be either a mid or a light colour so you can make some nice shadows. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tape it down onto my board. So obviously I've used this morning. So I've just got corners. I'm reusing my tape. If you can reuse your tape, that's a good thing because you don't want it to be too sticky because it can tear your paper. So you just want something that's going to hold it still. If you're on an easel, you might want to tape it on, you know, 2 or 4 sides just to keep it still. Where's all that tape go to? So this was obviously down one side last time. I'm just going to reuse that. If you're on an easel, you might want to use more tape just so that your page doesn't fall off completely. And by taping it down, you keep it nice and still, so you don't have to hold your paper all the time. It's nice if you don't have to hold onto it and stop it from moving around while you're painting. Lovely. Okay, so we've got that, and we've got that. We've got our colours organised. Next thing we need to do is rule up the grid lines. So I will measure correctly this time. I'm doing this in charcoal. So always use charcoal or pastel pencil when you're drawing. Don't ever try using graphite. If you do, it won't rub off. It kind of sticks to your paper, and it's really hard to cover with the pastels. It sort of shines through. It has this really weird silver shiny thing happening. So if you don't want that to happen, always use charcoal or pastel pencil. So I'm just making my halfway lines. This paper measures 23 by 30, so my halfway line up this way is 11.5, and downwards it's 15. So just do that. Make sure you don't press too hard, because we want to be able to take that off later on after we're finished, and we want to get all the mess off our paper, especially if you're not painting the background. It's good if you can remove all your pencil marks and things. Okay, so there we are. And next thing we need to do is draw this up. So it's exactly the same process as what we did before. So we've already had a crack at it, so now we can do it again basically. So let's start in the same place on the top left quarter, and again just mark in where all those little lines cross over, or where they meet on the grid mark. Okay, so you just measure it by eye. So this line here is about halfway down inside that grid line, so it's about to there. And then this one comes in about 1/6 of the way inside that grid line. And then you literally just join the dots. But this time I'm going to make it a little bit wider up here, because in my drawing before, I went down too low and I had the curve too low, so it didn't quite have that nice avocado shape. So I'm going to do it like that this time. It's probably still not quite right. No, it's not. It's like an eraser. So again, your kneadable eraser. See how that comes off nice and easy? So I didn't press too hard, and I've used charcoal, so it doesn't stain the paper too much. So it actually comes up through there and around. Like that. Cool. That's that bit done. And then I've got the little back area done, so I'll just draw that into here. So that's the back half. And then we've got to put the seed in. So we know the seed begins here on the halfway line. It goes around and it crosses over and it comes in at about there on that quarter. So then we can just draw the line in through there. It's almost a heart shape, kind of. It's sort of flatter on that left-hand side. So that's around about the seed shape. You can see I've got quite a lot of lines up here because I was trying to get the shape right. Again, you can just rub that out. If your lines are on the inside where we're going to be putting down some pastel, then don't stress too much because we'll cover it up with pastel afterwards. Cool. And then we'll go down into the bottom quarter. So same thing down there. Remember before we looked at how high inside this quarter is the seed. So if that's halfway across approximately, then the seed comes to about there, that shoulder of the seed. And then it kind of tapers up again into this area. So we can do this lovely, like a strawberry shape really, isn't it? Got sort of shoulders, and then it tapers off onto the right side like that. So that's my seed. And then I can continue down here with my the green section of the avocado, which is just below my halfway mark. So I'm going to say it's about there. And so I need to get this shape right. So it kind of bulges out a little bit on that top edge and then comes down like that. Kind of, sort of. And then we've got the bottom section of the skin as well. So that comes through to about there. So that's our bottom quarter. So now we've got half of it drawn. And then we can move over to the other side and put the detail in over there. So up into the top right hand section, the edge of the avocado comes in from the side of the page to about here. So then we can join those two lines. That's that one there. It kind of comes down and then sort of into a funny little point shape. It goes down like that. Oh, we haven't gotten to that bit yet. And then we've got the green section. So it comes in at about halfway, I reckon, about there on that grid line. So now we've just got to join those two dots through there. Like that. And then we do the same thing in the next segment. So all I've got to do now is get the shape of this right. So it's got a little wiggle kind of shape there at the top or on the right. And then we come down into that section there. And then this little bit, we've got our bumpy bit on the end. And then that comes down to the skin on the outside through there. And then we've got the back part of the avocado that comes down through about halfway up, so about to there, like that. And it's on there. So once you've got all your lines and things drawn, then we're ready to go with some colour and shading. You never know, someone might love this enough to want to hang it in their kitchen. So I'm going to stop right there and we'll have a little tea break. So that'll give you a chance to either carry on and catch up or go and have a little rest. And then we'll come back and get stuck into it. Just notice the shape of that's not quite right. So this is the opportunity to check all your shapes and sizes and things and make sure everything's lining up where it needs to be. Lovely. Okay, so let's get started with doing some colour here now. You should have your picture all drawn up and ready to go and the colours chosen. When you do, pop your reference photo nearby, so you want to be able to see that fairly easily, and I like to just prop it up in front of me. That way I don't have to move my head to go looking for it, and I can just prop it up here in front of me leaning on my computer. So it just means you don't have to try too hard to find your reference photo. Have your little pastels next to you handy, and I've also got a paper towel on my table so that if I get any dust on my page, I can tip that off. Don't try and blow it, because if you do blow your dust off your page, you'll end up with pastel dust all over the place, and it's not ideal. So try to tip it off rather than blowing it off. And then if you tip it onto a little paper towel or something, then you can shake it off later on and throw it away, and it doesn't get all through your house and your clothes and your furniture and everywhere. So I've got that ready there to go. I've got my eraser, and I've also got charcoal handy if I need that. We'll see how we go. So the first thing we want to do is look at the structure of the picture and decide what we're going to do first. And I always like to work from back to front. So I want to start on the backmost part of my picture and then work towards the front. And that way, if I want to get into, if I haven't done the background, for instance, and I do everything in the front and then I have to get back into the back area, it's harder to get around what I've already done. So I like to go from back to front, and that way you're kind of working forwards and you don't have to sort of get in behind things later on to try and fill them in or colour them or anything. So what we'll do is we'll fill in the back area, and I've picked up my darkest pastel. So that's my Flinders Red Violet. You might have a Flinders Blue Violet or something else. Whichever you have will be fine, as long as it's dark. If all you have is black, then use black. Maybe you've got a really dark blue. This is a kind of a purpley colour. It's got sort of a purple tinge to it. So I like that because it's very much like an avocado colour, which tends to have a little bit of a purpley brown tinge to it. What you want to do is just pick up your short stumpy piece of pastel like that. If you don't have a short piece, you might need to break a new stick. And this is probably a little bit too small, but generally I like to break my sticks into about thirds if you have the Art Spectrum round sticks. And then lie it down on its side like that on your paper and just rub it across like we did with the charcoal, pretty much. Same theory. When you do rub it across, you don't want to rub it too hard, so just kind of rub it gently and just get a little bit of colour down onto your paper like that, and just fill in that shape that we've drawn at the back there for the avocado. Once you've got some pastel rubbed in or pushed into your paper, then you will want to start blending that in with your fingers. So this is what's so great about pastels. You can just literally use your fingers and push the colour in like this. And if you go over the edges a little bit, don't worry, because we can tidy that up later on. And that's another reason I like to kind of do whatever is behind first, so that I can come back in the front later on and get a nice crisp edge around there. And my background's already done, so I don't have to try and get into there later on. Okay, so I'm just pushing all of this in with my finger. And when you do that, what I try to do is try not to lift your finger up each time you do that. So don't do this kind of motion, because what happens then is you get an inconsistent coverage. You end up putting your fingerprints everywhere, and it just makes funny little shapes, and it's really difficult to kind of fill it all up again. So when you're blending in with your finger, just keep your finger on the paper the whole time. Now, in some areas you can press lighter, and other areas you can press a bit harder, depending on how much you want to push it in. But if you keep your finger on the paper all the time, then you'll manage to get a nice continuous kind of blend, rather than in segments or sections or blobs, basically. So try to stay inside the lines if you can, and keep the shape of that half of the avocado. Yeah, lovely. Once you've blended it all in with your finger, now we want to get a bit of contour or texture onto this, because you can see in the picture that it's got little bumps on it. So it's like lumpy bits. So to do that, remember we picked up this brown colour before. Can you see some of those bumps seem to have a little brown kind of, I don't know, colour or dot or something? So what I'm doing is just doing some little dots with this brown. You can hardly see it on the screen. In fact, you can't really see it at all. So maybe I need to find a lighter colour. I'm going to continue to do this for now anyway, because what I'll do then is kind of push in those colours, and it'll start to make a nice sort of reddy brown colour that I want. So gently, once I've done those little dots, I'm just gently, very lightly wiping my finger over the top of that, just to blur them off a little bit. And I don't want to push too hard, because then it'll blend the colours together more than what I want. So I know it's hard to see, but I do have now I have two colours in there, and it's nice to have that going on, because it gives me a little bit of consistency and texture. Now, what else can I use in there? I might try a bit of the red, actually. So just a few little red dots. I know the dots on the avocado are not actually this red, but if I do a few little red dots like that, and again, I can push them in. I'm actually dabbing now, so with my finger, rather than blending, I'm lifting it up and down on the paper, and I know that's making fingerprints. if you do it lightly and consistently and kind of keep your movements fairly random, then hopefully you won't make too many fingerprints. I just want to very lightly rub that around. So what I'm trying to do is create those bumpy bits, or the feeling of bumps. So, because I didn't want a flat, smooth colour. I mean, you can if that's how you want your art to be, you know, very naive and all flat colours. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I actually prefer to have, you know, some texture and tone and different effects. If you have a black pencil, which I've just picked up now, what I want to do is try and get a little bit of that shadow effect in there. I'm just doing these little lines. I'm looking at the shapes of the bumps on the avocado, and I know it's probably hard to see, but because the light is shining down from above, what's happening is each of those little bumps is casting a shadow. And so I'm trying to kind of describe those shadows with a bit of this black pencil. And if you don't have a black pencil, then maybe some charcoal would work, or a bit of black pastel. You can use a black pastel, just use the sharp edge or the end of it to get a smaller mark or line. Okay, see, so by doing that, I'm hoping to create a little bit of like a shadow of all those little bumps in there. I feel like I'm going to go and get another colour. What do I need? It's almost a grey. It's got the lights on the bumps there. Let's see if I've got a grey kind of colour. I'm going to get a black as well. I tend to try not to use too much black, but I think in this instance we need the drama of the black. And I also want to create the extra dark shadow down here. So I'm just going to pop some black in here to get that shadow happening. So just again a short stumpy bit of pastel, and then lightly running it over into this area here, because this is where the shadow is on that part of the avocado. And then as you drag it up into the rest of the avocado, you kind of just try to merge it gently, so that we don't have a big stripe from black to the deep purple. Kind of want to merge it together so it's got this lovely gradual blend, and not too obvious either. So if you keep it fairly soft. And if you're getting a lot of dust on your page like that, then you'll have to tip it off. I'm just going to try this. I've got this grey colour. I just want to try that around on here to indicate, see the little bits of light that are shining off on the top of the avocado skin there. It's like a grey kind of light colour, and it's just because the light's bouncing off that skin and catching the edges of it. And again, I'm just going to gently, just very lightly push them in. And if you haven't got that kind of grey, then maybe another grey would work, or a lighter brown even. Just something that tone is more important than the colour. So the tone is what matters the most. I'm just popping a bit more black in here to create the shadows. So you can see you can spend as much time as you want to on the detail. So I can actually keep building up the shadows and the shapes under here. I'm getting all these little dark areas in there. I'm trying to keep them fairly random, even though there is a pattern to the skin, because everything like this does have a pattern in it. But they're not all exactly the same size, and they're all slightly different shapes. We've got the edges of it that's got these little bumps on it. So I'm just running my pencil around, trying to get some of the shadow happening on here. And as I said earlier, if you want to use charcoal instead of, if you don't have a black pencil, this is a charcoal one, black pastel pencil, or just a piece of black pastel like this. So this is just a short piece, but I can actually use the edge of it like that to get those little squiggly lines. So whatever you've got will work. You've just got to use each item differently, I guess. So your pencil, obviously, you just use the end of it. Pastel sticks are great because you can kind of use them in all different ways. You can use them on the side or on the tips, or you can even kind of make crumbs on your page and push that around with pastels. So you've got a few options, which is nice. I'm just looking at the little bump on the end there. Should have got another brown or green or brown. Yeah, definitely need a different brown for a bit. Yeah, and a different one. Probably an orangey kind of one. I'm trying to keep my colour palette limited so that, you know, it's not too difficult if you don't have all these colours in your palette. Oh, that's nice. And then actually that's the same colour as some of those little dots on there. So I'm just going to reinforce them a little bit more. So just using the edge of this pastel, this is a little square one. It's called Blue Earth, this brand. They're super soft and they're just glorious. And so just putting some of those little brown dots through there that I can see on the avocado skin. And I'll keep that pastel there because I'm going to reuse that in other areas. So when you use one colour in one place, it's good to try and use it elsewhere as well on the same painting, just to give that consistency. Okay, I'm just going to pop a little bit of shine so you can see that there's quite a bit of detail in this, even though it looks really basic and simple. There's quite a lot of detail in the skin. All right, so we shall move on, and we'll leave that area for now. If we do need to come back and touch up, then we can. It's just good to get that back part done first, and then we can move on to the next bit. So the next bit is the green area inside here. And if you wanted to, you could actually take out some of those grid lines, because if we put the green down, it might kind of mix in a little bit with the charcoal that we've got down on there. Sometimes that sort of makes your colours contaminated or too dark. So if you want to move them off, you can do that. Lovely. So let's pop some green on. Most people only have a couple of green pastels if you've just got a basic set. So we'll pop this one green on down here. Fill all this in. And so this is quite a dark green. And remember we talked before about how much lighter this area is in tone. So I don't want to get too dark there, but I do need to get enough down just so we can mix it in and make some new colours. Okay, so that's our little bit of green. Once you've got your green down, then grab your yellow. So again, I'm just using the pastel on its side and blending it around like this. Now I want to get that rim of green around the edge kind of darker than I do in the middle. So I'm going to sort of focus on the edge area with this yellow and the green to create that darker, lovely, rich, limey green colour. Like that. So it's looking pretty bright at the moment. And of course, if you like it that bright, then, you know, by all means, keep it that way. Once you've got a couple of colours on like that, then it's time to start blending that in. Now, I don't know about you, but I've got very dirty fingers here. And if you don't want to get any dark off your fingers into this area, it's a good idea to give them a wipe or a clean. I forgot to say, it's good to have a little hand towel next to you that's got a wet on one end and dry on the other, because that way you can wipe your fingers clean and then dry them off. So I don't have a wet end, it's just all dry, so I'll just push it all in. And what I'm going to do is rub this around. So remember we did this motion with the charcoal before, and we're kind of rubbing it around in a circular direction so that we get that lovely continuous smooth avocado flesh happening. And you can see as I'm doing this, I'm making quite a lot of dust. So what happens is when you put the pastel in the paper and then you push it around, you tend to have all this excess dust from the pastel that sort of just won't get pushed in. It sits on the paper, which is kind of annoying sometimes because it gets in the way. And that's what I was talking about earlier when I said you need to tip your dust off, because if I blow this now, it'll just go all over the house. And so I'm going to tip it off and get rid of it, get it out of the way. So I'll just finish rubbing this in. I'm just running my finger around and around, trying to get this lovely smooth motion. The pastel just curve around like that. And bringing it all the way into the middle too, because we're going to lighten up this middle green area with the light and yellow in it. But it's still good to push it all in and get it to stick to the paper. It's very bright, that's green, isn't it? So I'm going to tip my paper up on its side and tip the dust off onto my paper towel next to me. So you can see where the dust is all fallen here, that it's kind of stuck to the paper, and we'll have to clean that up afterwards. So try not to push that in or do anything with it, because if you do, it'll stick and then you won't have a nice clean background. If you want to get it off now, then your kneadable eraser is what you need. Just find yourself a cleanish area and dab it. Lift, push and lift. Don't rub. So you just want to dab and lift. And what happens is all the little bits of pigment, the dust, sort of sticks to the eraser. And then you've got to knead it. So you roll it around until you find another cleanish side and keep dabbing until you've got all that excess dust off the page. So if you keep tipping off your dust, you might have to keep doing this regularly. So I'm going to save it till the end. And if worse comes to worse and you can't get it off and you end up staining the paper and you end up with big blotches on it that won't come off, then you can always fill the background in with pastel in another colour or the same colour or whatever you like. So there is always that option. All right, so we've got this lovely green going on, and what I want to do now is lighten up the middle area of the green because this is too dark. And I've got my lemon, my very light yellow colour. Now, if you don't have a light yellow, then try white. And what we're going to do is just literally the same sort of thing, just run this over the green where we want it to be lighter. You can see I'm already creating more dust that I'm going to have to tip off. Try to leave the outer edge where the green's a little bit darker undone. And then we'll start to blend it in with our fingers and kind of merge the two together. And where the seed will go, just make sure you kind of overlap that edge so we don't end up with a big gap around the seed later on. So now we've got the lemon yellow down over the green. We're going to do the same thing. We're just going to run that around with the fingers and blend it in and see how that's making the green go lighter. It's lovely. Much lighter. I'm getting this lovely milky kind of green colour. Now you can keep blending and that'll get smoother and smoother. So it'll all start to merge into the one lovely colour. And as you come out to the edge near the darker green, just try to kind of blur the edges a little bit so that it's not a hard line between the dark green and the light. So we just want to merge them slightly gently. But try not to go all the way to the edge, otherwise you drag that light green out too far. And if you did go all the way to the edge, you can always pop some more dark green around the edges again. So that's the lovely thing about pastels. You can kind of redo stuff quite a few times before you can't get them wrong. When you're doing this lovely smooth kind of texture, just keep your fingers on the paper. Try not to lift it off. And run around this area in a lovely smooth kind of motion so that we're creating a smooth, gentle finish. Okay. It's still a little bit too dark, so now that I've pushed that in, I can add a bit more of my lemon or white, really I'm using, to get it lighter again. So this is the nice thing, you can actually keep adding layers and pushing them in until they get nice and light. Okay, so rubbing them in again. So what we're doing is now we're just adding more light and lightening up that green. You can see there's a lot of dust sitting there, so it doesn't seem to want to get pushed in. The paper will get full, so what they call it, on this kind of paper, which feels like sandpaper, it's quite gritty, they call it tooth. So if you can imagine little teeth on a comb or a brush, scrubbing brush, say, and you fill it all up with powder, then you sort of get to a point where you can't fill any more onto it. It gets too full. So that's what they call the tooth of the paper. And the tooth gets full and you can't add any more. So that's starting to look all right. I think I still want it lighter, so I'm going to try a bit of white now. A bit of white on there. White always makes things look a little bit kind of milky and opaque. So I don't always mix with white. I like to try other, light colours first before I try white, because I don't want this to go too milky looking. I still want it to have that lovely yellow kind of sheen. But I think that's okay. A little bit of white's not too bad. Just running the fingers around and around like that. Still too light, darkening. And a bit more again. As I said, there'll come a point where I can't get any more. I'm just going to skip. This lemon's quite soft. It's probably a Jeanne pastel. That's a brand. And they're really soft and creamy. So they do fill the tooth of the paper a lot faster than a drier pastel would. That's getting closer now. So again, as I'm now starting to build up the layers and blending, I'm pressing a little less hard. So just pressing lighter and letting this gorgeous colour sort of sit on top of the others now. Because what I'm trying to achieve is that lovely transparent kind of effect where you can kind of see the other colours underneath this one. So I'm going to tip off some dust. Quite a lot sitting there. Again, that's stuck to my paper on this side where I tipped it off. But just going to gently run my fingers around just to try and even up these colours, get them to sort of blend nicely together. As I said, try to keep your finger on the paper all the time. That way you get a nice, consistent, smooth coverage. So that should do. It's not perfect, the colour, but that'll be fine. That'll be fine for now. So once you've got all of that going on, Then we want to, might do the seed next, and then we'll go and work on the outside of this piece. So that'll mean the edges around here and this section underneath. So the seed is this lovely reddy brown colour. Put a bit of this dark down first. So we've kind of lost the outline of it because I overlapped it with the avocado, but that's good because now I can sort of draw in the shape again. So remember, it's like a heart shape almost. It's like a sideways heart shape. And again, when you're drawing it in, just notice how far the edges are from, say the top of the avocado. I think my seed needs to be way bigger than that. Okay, I'll make it bigger. And if you've still got some grid lines on there, you can refer to those as well. So sometimes when you do this kind of thing, you fill in colours, you do lose your lines, you lose the edges that you drew before, which is why it's always good to have that little rehearsal with the charcoal, but also to be able to see where the grid lines are is good because then you can sort of keep referring back to where they are. So even though I've rubbed them out, you can still see where it is whereabouts, and I can see that, okay, so the bottom of the seed needs to touch that middle line, and then the top of it is actually way closer to the edge of the avocado than here. It's higher there, so I've got more skin there. It's actually way bigger. Takes up a lot of space, this seed. There we go. So I'm pretty happy with where that is for now. And when we add the tones and the lights, it'll change it again and give it that lovely 3D effect. So I'm just going to blend all this in. So I used my darkest red violet that I had on the skin in the first place. Now you can see as I'm blending this in, it's kind of mixing with some of the green and lemon underneath. So it's creating an interesting colour. It's nice. And a lot of dust. So see all that dust sitting around the outside of it there? I'm going to have to tickle that off soon. I'm not going to worry just yet because I'm sure I'll make some more. So looking at the seed in the picture, you can see there's a little bit of like an orange pattern through it. So I'm just going to pick up this orangey brown colour that I had earlier. And I'm just going to put a few splotches on here where I can see that pattern. And then I'm just going to gently blend them in. I want to try and keep them kind of as their own shapes. So try not to blend it too much with all the other colour underneath it. Just there's a very distinct couple of colours in there. And again, depending on how hard you press will depend on how much everything blends. So if you just run your finger over things really lightly, then it'll blur off your edges and sort of just gently blend the colours. But if you want to blend them in really well, then press harder. So it's all about pressure as well as the direction you move your finger in, and yeah, pressure and direction are the two things. Now I can see there's some little darker areas in here, so I'm going to pick up this blue violet or red violet and just darken off a couple of those shapes. See those shapes around here. Just to get that little pattern into the seed. It's quite a nice little pattern in that range of reds and darks. So that's quite nice. Do it a bit more orange or something. Then I'm going to add more colours to my palette. I don't want to overcomplicate it. Okay, Now let's look at this seed and figure out the light and dark on it. So when I look at the picture of it, I can see that the light's hitting it. You know how we did it in charcoal before. So we've got light hitting it here and over here on the top left edge. So there's light there and there. It's also a little bit lighter just across this top shoulder there. I'm just putting this in to illustrate what I'm talking about. You don't need to do this part yet. But then underneath, around under here, seems darker to me. It's not hugely darker, but that's got to be where the shadow is because the light's hitting the other side of it. And I'm going to push all this in a minute, softly, because I don't want to make it too muddy. But I just want to blend it in a little bit and start to create some form on here. So first I've got to get rid of this dust again. So I've just got a little bit of pastel on here and I've got dark under there and I've got a bit of light. I did use that creamy colour for the shine and not white. So what I'm going to do is just very softly, very lightly, just push this in here on the underside to create some shadow. And it's not a strong shadow, it's quite subtle, but I still want it to have that feeling of turning with the light shining on one end. And so you can kind of determine how dark or light you want something as to how hard you press the colour in. So if I press this harder, it'll go kind of darker and it'll be more muddy. See how that's going kind of much darker. And it's blending all the colours in with the black that I popped in there. And see how it's creating a really nice form. It looks like there's shadow on this side. And now I'm going to clean my finger off and do the same thing where I've put the light. So just keeping it light with my finger. I don't want to push it in too much because if you push it too much, it turns to mud and it gets a bit murky. So see how that's now starting to create a little bit of form and shine. And it's just telling us that, you know, the light's coming from this top right or top side. Just picked up some dust and didn't mean to push that in. But now it's starting to look like it's got some shape. And then if we add, I'm going to try to do it with white. Just going to put a little bit of shine on this end here. So what I've got is a short bit of pastel. I'm just going to lightly wipe that over here. And what's happening is the texture of the paper is picking up some of the dust or the pastel. And it's just sitting like that on the surface. It's quite lovely. And what I want to do is not blend in this part because if I blend that, it'll lose the shine and it'll just go kind of dull and get lost again. So as you work your layers up, you want to kind of stop blending and then let the pastel sit on the surface and just do its thing and shine. And so I'm going to do the same thing over here. So that's what you want to be able to do now, is get that little bit of shine on there. And all you need to do is just put your pastel on here and push it and wiggle it. And you get that lovely little shine on there. And the same on the other side, on this left-hand side where there's light. Just push and wiggle. And if you just try to use the side of a short piece, you'll get a much softer mark. If you use the tip, you're going to get harder lines, and so they're harder to kind of blend in. And you don't want to keep mucking around with it too. Once it's down there, don't keep touching it and putting other stuff on there because you'll just lose the shine and it'll turn to white. So you've got to be very controlled and not touch it again. See how that's starting to shine now? You can actually see the contours and that it's a solid object because we've got the shadow underneath and we've got a little bit of light shining on those ends where the light is. Lovely. I'm just going to tip off my dust again. Okay. So I'll just wait a couple of minutes so you can catch up with me. While I'm doing that, I'm just going to clean up some of these edges with my black pencil because I've got all this dust sitting here between the seed and the avocado, and it's just getting a bit messy. And that's the trouble when you have a light colour like the avocado and then you add a dark colour next to it. You want to try and keep your edges nice and sharp and clean. And often it's a little bit tricky with pastels to get them to do that because they are so crumbly, I guess. So it's a bit tricky sometimes. And that's why pastel pencils are great because they can actually get in and do some of the fine lines. So you can see on here, I've got a fair bit of dust sitting on top of my green now because I have put the red and the browns on afterwards. What I'm going to do now is just try and clean that up a little bit with my eraser. Just try and get some of that brown dust off my avocado with the eraser. And of course, you've got to keep finding a clean edge. Otherwise, you'll just put that dark colour down again. And if you've cleaned that up as best you can and you can't get any more off, or it's sort of changing the colour underneath, then maybe you need to come back around it with the green or the yellow or whatever we had before, and just try to sharpen up the edge a bit more. That kind of worked, I think. So it's just cleaning up the edges with my light yellow. And I'm now going to let that sit on the surface again so that it's a pure colour on top. And it kind of glows, doesn't it? It's nice. I might continue that round here. So you can sort of come back in around things and clean them up as you go. Lovely. All right. So once we've got all that bit done, tip off more dust. We need to put the skin on the underside of this avocado. And then we need to put it around the edges as well. So you can see around the edge, you can see the brown skin just around the edge of the avocado. And then we've got the thicker area underneath here. So what I'm going to do is grab this is my red or blue violet, the darkest one that we used at the beginning for the skin. And I'm going to use that. So if you've got a short piece, it's a little bit trickier to get those edges in there. Take some practice. If you have pencils, then use pencils. If you'd rather do this with a black pencil or even some charcoal. So I'm just going to draw in this line around the edge. And notice that it's not a straight edge, so there's little lumpy, bumpy bits. So it doesn't matter if you're not exactly straight. It's fine it's good actually to be a little bit wobbly. So see how we're just outlining now this green avocado, and you need to come around on the other side as well because this one sits in front of the other half. And while I've got this in my hand, I'm just going to continue on down through here and fill in the skin on the underside there. Like that. And then I can blend that in with my fingers again. I might put a bit of brown in one along here, just to get a couple of colours in there that I can then mix together push that in with your fingers, just gently, gently rolling in. As I said, it's hard to get those sharp lines, especially when you've got big chunky fingers and you're smudging stuff. If you do want to blend in a smaller area, sometimes it's good to use a blender. So see if I can find a blender to show you. So you can get a few different ones, and they're a rubber tip kind of things. So these are just a couple. These come in a set, and you get different shapes on the ends. And so you can actually use these to get into the pointy bits like here, to blend in some of the pastel when your fingers are maybe too fat. And they're really good. I have tried paper stumps. I don't like those as much. They tend to sort of, I think they feel like they take the pastel off the page rather than blending. They're great with charcoal, but not so good with pastel. So these kinds of things are really great to get into the pointy bits if your fingers are too fat, and they have different ends. And then there's the Art Spectrum brand. So again, this has a rubber tip on it, and these come in different sizes as well. I think this might be, it's a number 2, so it's probably the smallest one you can get. They have really big ones as well. And you can use those with oil paints and all sorts, but they're just really good for pushing the colour in. And your fingers won't reach if they're too chunky. So blenders are great to have if you can manage to get yourself a couple. Then it'll make life a little bit easier. You can also do stuff like this. So for instance, around the edge here, you just want to kind of merge this line in a little bit, push it in so it's not all sitting on the surface. So you can do that kind of thing as well and just make it stick to the paper a bit more. Do it like that. So yeah, blenders are great. Cool. Now I'm just going to tip off the dust again. And looks like we're getting there slowly but surely. Right. I do want to shine that seed up a little bit more now I'm looking back at the picture. So it's always good to kind of walk away for a minute, look away from what you're doing, and then come back and look at it again. And you'll see things you didn't even know needed to be done or undone, depending on what's going on. So I'm pretty happy with how that's looking at the moment. And we're going to wind up very soon. But first, we've just got to do a few final little touches. And one of those is getting some of this. Can you see around the edge of the avocado on the photo? Just show you. Around the edges here is like an orangey colour just between the skin and the flesh. So what I want to do is get a little bit of that orangey brown around the inside of the avocado there. I'm going to use this pastel that I had earlier for other bits and bobs. So I'm just going to get the very corner. Now, if you have pencils, you might find that a bit easier to manage. So I'm just going to use the edge and just draw in a few marks just in between the flesh and the skin to try and get the feeling of that colour happening through there. Always referring back to your reference photo too. So that's where all the information is. That's what holds everything you need to know. So if you're not sure of something, just check back on your photo. So see how that just makes a little difference, and it really makes it look a little bit more authentic with that extra little brown orange colour through there, because that's what avocado is. have, isn't it? That's what they look like. I've just done the little knob on the end here as well in that colour. So when you're doing this kind of thing, you'll notice things that need fixing or changing from what you did a little earlier. The other thing I wanted to point out was, see this colour in here? So there's dark skin on the front part of the avocado that we just put in here. Needs to be a little bit lighter than the one behind it, because otherwise it's not going to come forward. It's not going to sit in front. And if you look at your reference photo, you can see it's got almost like a grey kind of shine just on this end here. So what I'm doing, I put that little brownie colour in. I'm just going to blend them in with my blender. And see how that's kind of sitting forward now, so it's not melding into that the back section of the avocado, the other piece. It's sitting forward on its own. So that's what we wanted to achieve. We need to bring that forward. So you've always got to look at the colour of something and think, okay, I need to get that closer to the front or further away. And then you've got to figure out what tone is that, what colour is that. And again, looking at your black and white picture will help you find that. So if we flip this over and look at the black and white picture, see how you can actually see the front half of the avocado sitting in front of the back half, because this section here, even though they're the same colour, it's the same skin, it's a little bit lighter. It's got a little shine in it. And so it's coming towards us, it's closer. And we need to make sure we put that little shine in there so that it comes closer to us and sits in front. So I'm just using this little bit of grey. I don't want to use white because it's not bright, shiny white, not like on the seed. It's just a little bit of maybe reflection on there off the table or whatever it is this is sitting on. So often light on something isn't always the light that's shining on it. It could be a reflection from the things around it. So if I use this grey just very softly, see how that kind of just gives it a little bit of difference between the two and brings it forward. And same around here, just a little bit of light on the edge there. And it just brings it closer to us and sends the other one further back. You could almost do the same sort of thing just around the edges on here too, to give that little edge a shine and bring it forward from the back half. Doesn't have to be very much at all, just really subtle little shine on there. And if you don't use white, but use something that's light, like this grey, so this is like a warm grey, I guess you'd call it. Even your a yellow or something like that would work really well. But you just keep your touch very light, so it's just a very subtle little reflection, slight change of colour. Okay. So I'm just going to run around here again because I feel like I need to just come in a little bit closer to the flesh of the avocado. I've got a gap there between the skin and the flesh. So I'm just close that gap so there's no weird looking lines in there. And then again, just bring this little brown one around so it looks like the inside through there. And have broken lines. So even though we've got, it's obviously continuous, but if you just have broken lines, so little short lines rather than one long continuous line, it looks a little bit more natural. Lovely. All right, and so just want to add a bit more of a shine to that seed. I want it to glow a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is get my white again. Make sure it's nice and clean, so wipe it off into a paper towel or something, because they pick up colour from each other. And I'm going to press it a little bit harder here, just to make that shine a bit more obvious. So it's just a little shape, little tiny little shape that you want to just push a little bit harder with the pastel to make the white stick to the base. But don't blend it, don't touch it with your fingers, or it'll just go to mud again. And try and keep it nice and pure. When you want pure colour, you just want it to sit on the top and not blend it in. All right, so now we've got to put some shadow under here, and that will put us onto a surface. I'm going to use, what am I going to use? I might just go straight to try purple actually. I don't know if purple will work, but let's see. This is the fun part. You can actually try things, and then if it doesn't work out, just go over it with something else. Quite like the idea of purple for the shadow. For interest. So can you see how, as I'm rubbing that onto my paper, it's catching on the little bumps in the paper, so it's kind of creating this fun little lumpy effects. And so that's the paper texture doing that. And I now need to kind of push it in and blend it in so that it all merges into an even colour. And sometimes it's hard to do that because you might not have enough pastel on the paper. So if it's doing this sort of thing and still looking a bit blotchy and you want it to be smoother, you're going to have to add more pastel because obviously there's just not enough on there to fill in. The purple's nice, isn't it? Ooh, yum. I should have put that in the seed. I love the warmth of that. It's beautiful. Oh, that's lovely. So it's fun to try different colours and see what they do. So I'm going to pop a bit more here. A bit more down here too, because I just want to blend this in and make it a bit more consistent. And then if you wanted to darken that shadow off, so I push it in and see what it looks like. If I feel like I want to darken it again, then I can just add more dark over the top. I think I will darken it, maybe just in around the base. So as it comes out from the edges here, I can leave some of that purple to sort of bleed off and blur off. But around the actual base of the avocados, I think I want it to be darker in here. See in there? And if I use black, that's quite dramatic, and it'll kind of make it more drama. That's nice. And so just notice where the shadow sits underneath these guys, because I've just got to make sure you get the shape right. So if I put a bit of black through here, like that, it also helps to differentiate between the actual thing and the shadow that it's casting. So just pushing that around, gently, gently, pushing that one around. So the harder you press, the darker it will go. See how I'm pressing quite hard here, going really lovely and dark, and then kind of just merging it into that purple. Ooh, what a beautiful colour. The purple and black's beautiful together. So nice. So this is where I get the most joy, is just seeing what colours I can make and what they look like when they're on the paper together. Lovely. So I think we're just about there. What I'm going to do now is chip off some of this dust again, and then we'll have a little reassessment of everything. So we might just run over that with some words. So if you have some dust, just tip it off so that it's not sitting on the paper. And I'm just going to run around this and have a look at it. So just comparing it to my image, what I can see, just move some things around so I can get the photo and the painting all in the same place. That there. That there. So what I've noticed straight away when I look away and I come back to it is that I need to round off the top of here. See how this area here is not quite rounded off, so I need to make that a little bit higher there. I'm just using a pencil to tell myself what I'm going to do. So I need to round that off there and make that a little bit more plump. What else do I need to do? I'm just looking at the back section first. So probably need a bit less light in here so I can use my black pencil and darken that off. And maybe some more shadow around the base of this little bumpy bit. Just fix that up a little bit. Cool. What else do I need to do? I feel like I need to add a bit more black, maybe around the edges of this here. So I'm just kind of running my eyes over the picture and comparing it to what I've drawn, and then touching up with a black pencil where I want more dark. So I'm just running around there, looking at that. It's good. Come down to here. This shape here. This shape here needs to do a bit more like that, I think. Yeah, come down a bit more square in that section there. So I can just mark that in with my lighter colour, and then I'll just come back over it with my dark, just to redo that little shape in there. And in through here, so it kind of comes in through there, and it dips in a little bit into the flesh in that section there. It's like a little heart shape through there. So I've got to change that around a bit. Just blend that in through here. Probably went in a bit too far. The nice thing about nature and fruit is that no two pieces are ever identical. So we can have a little bit of a wonky avocado here. And then I want to bring this section forward here. And so we've got more dust on there now. A bit more green in here. Push that in with my fingers. So when you do push things around, you can use the pad of your finger too. So you have quite a lot of control about how you move things around. So this bit here, this bit of skin, comes up a little higher, and then it kind of drops down. So it should come up to there. So I can fill that in with this dark colour here. Just adjust the shape a little bit. So see how easy this is to just change things a little bit when you need to, because nothing's dried off. You know, you can move pastel around forever. It's never set unless you actually spray it with fixative. That's when it sets. And you only ever do that in between layers, so never on your final layer. Because what it does is it dulls the colours, takes all the vibrancy out of your colours, but it's great for fixing different layers. So for instance, if I filled up the tooth of my pastel and I couldn't get any more colour on it, and I still want to add more, I can spray it with a fixative, and then that sort of sets everything, and then you can add more over the top. So it gives you a lot of freedom. Okay, so I'm just running around the edge of this here. I think my seed could be slightly bigger still, and I'm not going to worry about it though. I'm going to add a bit more light just on here, on this shoulder. And this is not my white, this is my Australian grey, so it's just a light creamy colour. just to give that little bit more contour around there. A bit more of a form on the seed. Yeah, like that. It's got a few little shiny bits through there, but the white shine on that section there works really nicely. And I think that might just about do it. I could do more work on that back section with the avocado and definitely give this edge a little bit more bumpiness to indicate the texture of the skin. So I could just run around the edges of that a little bit more and make some more bumps so that it's not too smooth. And then just kind of merge those colours together a bit more. Something like that. But I think for a couple of hours we've done all right. And feel free to continue working on that if you feel like you need to do more. And I would love to see your photo when you're done. Lovely. So we'll wind up now, and just want to say thanks very much for coming along and being part of this. It's been great. I've never done an avocado before, so there you go. It's the first time that we're doing. Oh, I forgot to say, don't forget to put your name on it too. So if you have a pencil, pencils are the best thing to sign your artwork with. So this is just a little charcoal pencil, but a pastel pencil will be fine as well. Pop your name on there, and if someone loves it, you can stick it in a frame and give it to them for Christmas. Cheers.